everything. I feel
Mhm.
like this is the first time I even use a recording. Usually it's the other people who host a meeting, so we'll see. I think it's anyway. We'll find out. I think it's everything.
Oh
Okay.
yeah, it looks like it's recording everything, but this isn't just an audio podcast that you'll be releasing it.
There we do have a YouTube channel, so
Okay.
yeah, so it's gonna be visual.
Okay, no worries. Glad
All
I
right.
knew that.
So I'm just gonna do a quick opening right here. Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Film Talk Weekly. I'm your guest host, Nate Nie, the Associate Programmer of Santa Fe International Film Festival. Today, we have a very special guest, Valerie Steinberg. She's one of Variety's 10 producers to watch in 2023. Her credits include major theatrical releases, including The Inspection, War Pony, and Karmalink, which won the Best Narrative Feature at Santa Fe International Film Festival in 2021. She's also produced numerous successful short films like Hair Wolf, Freeze, and The Breakthrough, sorry, I'm gonna restart the sentence. She's also produced numerous successful short films like Hair Wolf, Freeze, and The Breakthrough, starring the wonderful Greta Lee. Thank you so much for joining us, Valerie.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
All right. So I was reading your bio on your website a little bit, and I noticed that you graduated from Yale with a degree in Chinese, which immediately caught my attention because I am Chinese. So I'm just wondering, let's talk about the sort of the genesis. How did you start with a kind of a non-film uh, academic background and started from there and become a successful producer?
Yeah, so I went to Yale at a time when I had been studying Spanish my whole life. I grew up in Los Angeles, and I've always been fascinated with the whole world and wanted to take the opportunities to learn a new language, one that I knew nothing about. And it was also a time when everyone was saying, you got to learn Chinese. It was just like the word on the street. Actually, the number of seminars they had of the entry level Mandarin class at Yale that year, they had to triple the number they expected
Oh,
based on demand. So it was like a huge surge in demand. And I was just sort of one of the many people at the time that was like, let's just explore this. And Yale also has really generous programs for East Asian language study. It's called the Light Fellowship. So I was able to get a Light Fellowship for one of the summers to spend in China. So anyway,
oh,
I just sort of went in open-minded to my liberal arts education, and I ended up having a double major in philosophy
right.
and what they call the East Asian Studies major with the China concentration that included Chinese language and other parts about Chinese history, sociology, philosophy. Um, so yeah, long story short, I ended up studying Chinese, and then I went to China for 2 summers, and I was able to accrue enough credits where getting the East Asian Studies second major was relatively easy to do because I was already, of course, fascinated to take other courses about China. And the why of it was just, I think, to like explain it's sort of, and to tie it back to my work as a film producer, it's that I'm always trying to just like explore unexplored corners and try to find new ways to, as a film producer, in a way that I'm, enabling storytelling. I'm trying to tell these stories that are underrepresented to the world. And similarly, as an individual, I'm fascinated to discover and explore anything, whether it's the farthest corners of the world geographically or whether it's the farthest corners of my own brain philosophically. And so I think that sort of categorizes what my academic focuses were. But at the same time, I always had a love of performance and dramatic writing. And so and that was originally more in the theater space. Growing up, I attended a lot of theater. I acted in amateur productions, and at Yale there's such a strong theater program
Oh
that was
yeah.
just like super easy
That's
to get
yeah.
involved with theater. And so yeah, I acted in some plays and musicals, and then my senior year I directed, acted in, and produced a production of Richard O'Brien's The Rocky Horror Show, which I decided to do all
Love it.
female, which was like an incredible experience. And the producing of it was almost inadvertent. It was just, I had to get it done, and I knew I wanted to put this show on, and I knew that I needed to get every person involved and the money in place and manage the budget. And then I realized by the end of it that what I'd been doing was producing it. And in terms of film, I didn't have a lot of academic exposure to film. I took one course on film while I was at Yale. It was called Psychopathology in Film, where we took, every week we watched a new movie about a different psychosis and then wrote a few papers about it. It was really interesting, but it wasn't at all like a film school education. It was more like a kind of literature approach to film. So I had almost no real understanding of the craft of filmmaking or much knowledge about the film industry. Even though I grew up in LA, it was all very like on the sidelines, my understanding of the industry. So when I graduated from Yale, I spent a year in the south of France, actually, because again, I wanted to learn more languages and study more things and travel to other places in the world. And I picked up beginning French my senior year. So I spent a year teaching English in the south of France and learning French. But after that, I kind of got my career started. I moved to London and started working for a British theater producer called Sonia Friedman, who's an incredible mentor still to this day. I really admire the career that she's led in terms of sort of walking a line between the quality driven work and understanding what makes work commercial and being able to kind of make that balance work with each choice about how to pursue each production. And so I worked for her in London. And then I moved to New York and kept working for her in New York and started working for some other theater producers in New York, and then started to really get to know the New York theater scene and started to produce small showcase productions and work with small theater companies. And all of this was very exciting, enriching, but I couldn't help but feel like I was in a world that felt not expansive enough to imagine a full career. Not that you can't build a career in theater, but it's obviously quite small comparatively. And in order to kind of be a producer in theater, there's very few ways in, and I just wanted to see if there might be some more ways in film. And it had always kind of been in the back of my mind, like, what does a career in the film industry look like? But really having no academic background in it and no professional background in it, now a few years after graduating college at that time, I decided to just fly to Sundance and figure it out for myself. And this is sort of a good timing to talk about that, because obviously Sundance is coming up. I'm going to Sundance now in 2 days, which will be my 11th Sundance, if you include the virtual years, which is arguable. So I've been going literally every year since 2013. And it was a life-changing experience. Just going to Sundance as like someone in my early to mid 20s, completely, excited, extroverted, and with like knowledge that I wanted to produce because I'd been in the theater producing world, but not really knowing how the film industry worked. And I was very fortunate, especially because I was living in New York still at the time, that I fell in with a group of students at NYU Grad Film. And NYU Tisch Grad Film is one of the strongest film programs in the world. And I met a few filmmakers who were in their 3rd year of that graduate program, and they were gearing up to make their thesis films. And they were sick of producing for each other because they all entered the program wanting to be directors, but had picked up other skills like producing or shooting or sound mixing in certain cases, production designing. But I was like, I want to be a producer. And so they were like, oh, do you want to produce for me? And that quickly started happening. And so really the shorter answer is I just started learning by doing. I was on the sets of these short films. I started by PAing on one, and then very quickly I second AD'd the second, and by the third one I was producing. And the producing just hasn't stopped. And so it really started with just boots on the ground, short film producing, understanding how to build a crew, understanding what every single role in a film set does, understanding how to be really, attentive to the highest level of excellence at every stage in terms of team building, in terms of casting, in terms of script development before we're shooting, in terms of managing a budget and a schedule, and in terms of overseeing post-production with regards to giving notes on cuts and then finishing the film with color, sound, score, etc. And so I really kind of learned all of that in the capsule form of a short film, and I kept doing that over and over again. And then, as you mentioned in your intro, some of my shorts started to do quite well. The first short that got into a major festival that I had produced was in 2016 at South by Southwest, a short I produced called Everybody Dies. That was part of Jane Schoenbrun's omnibus feature film Collective Unconscious that premiered actually as a feature in competition, but I had produced one segment of it. Yeah, it was really fascinating. And the director, Nuatama Bodomo, is someone I had worked with before, and now I was producing for her, and it was very exciting. But it was still part of a really big team of 5 shorts. But then the next year I had a short I had produced called Friday, directed by Laura Moss, who's, still a very exciting filmmaker today who just debuted their first feature film, Birth Rebirth, a year ago at Sundance, and has been nominated for 3 Independent Spirit Awards this year for that film. And I'm still working with Laura on another feature we're developing. So, these moments just kept and so Friday premiered at South by and then played Tribeca and then won dozen plus, maybe 20 festival awards. Might have played Santa Fe actually. And then Hairwolf in 2018 won the jury award at Sundance, played a million festivals as well, and winning other awards, and actually is being brought back to Sundance this year, 2024, 6 years after its initial world premiere, because it's the 40th anniversary of Sundance. So they're doing a bunch of retrospective screenings of features as well as a shorts block that Mark and Jay Duplass are presenting. It's called the 40th edition short film show. And it's playing at the Egyptian Theater.
God,
and so Hairwolf is going to be there again. And the director and I are both going. And yeah, it'll be really fun. So after doing a bunch of shorts and really understanding what producing was, but not doing it on the real professional landscape of a feature film, I was just like, let's see if I can approach a feature film the same way, which is how some independent films are made, right? The real buy my own bootstraps, let's make a budget, let's make this as cheaply as we can, let's be very scrappy. But ultimately, to really work in this industry, there's a lot bigger playing pieces that need to be understood to be really working in it. So I was like, I want to do it all. I want to understand how this industry functions, but in the meantime, can I put together a feature film purely independently financed? And I was fortunate in this period to meet Jake Wachtel, who co-wrote and directed Karmalink, which had a working title at the time, but we developed it for 4 years, or I think the 4 years includes when we shot it. But we worked on it for many years together before it was released, and we took it through development labs like the Hong Kong Asia Film Financing Forum and the Focus Asia Project Market in Udine, Italy for Asian films, which is really cool. And yeah, we shot the film in Phnom Penh, Cambodia in early 2019. It was an 8-week shoot, and then we had a long post-production that was interrupted by the pandemic and kept going. And then, yes, our world premiere was at the Venice Film Festival. It was the opening night film of Venice Critics Week. And then our North American premiere was at the Santa Fe, at the time, the Santa Fe Independent Film Festival. Now I know the Santa Fe International Film Festival. And we won Best Narrative Feature there. So that was incredibly fun. I had an amazing time there. And yeah, the film has gone on to, be now you can watch it on Tubi or on TVOD, Amazon, Google Play, Canopy. There's a lot of places you can watch the film now. So that was an incredibly positive experience. And then you mentioned War Pony and The Inspection, both of which are films that I executive produced. So I do a mixture of now producing and executive producing, and currently have a slate of about a dozen feature films, a couple TV projects that are at different stages of financing, casting, packaging. Hopefully we'll be shooting some of them soon.
Awesome. Just want to clarify, the first time you went to Sundance, was it with the project, or is it just let's go and take a look? And
let's go and take a look. I went how many times before I had a project? I didn't have a project at Sundance until 2018 that I had produced. I worked on a short film called Afronauts that premiered at Sundance 2014. So actually the second time I went to Sundance, there was a film I had PA'd on. But in terms of actually had produced, 2013, 14, 15, 16, 17, finally in 2018, I had a film. So no, I love Sundance. I am in favor of going with or without a film. Like this year, even though Hairwolf is playing in the anniversary block, I was planning to go before I found that out. So I would be going unless, of course, I have a film shoot or pre-production or something I really can't miss. It's a definite for me. It's so fun. It's the beating heart of the industry. It's a place to really connect and meet people and further relationships and take meetings and impromptu meetings and see great films, before they're really anywhere else in the world. And it's just an amazing experience. I think that's easier for a producer to do than a director or many other people, because, it's always a thing when you're at a festival and someone says, do a film here. And you're like, no, and I think for a director that can feel a little bit more like my tail's between my legs. Whereas I think for a producer, but especially at Sundance, where it's understood to be an industry meeting point. It's a place that I go with or without a film. So yeah, I went completely. I found a friend of a friend's couch to crash on the first year out in Heber City. But by mid-Sundance, I found a place to crash in Park City with John Batiste, actually. It was very interesting before he was who he is today. Yeah. So yeah, it was a whole fun adventure, and these are the kind of things that can just happen at Sundance.
Yeah, no, I went to film school, UCLA Film School, MFA myself, and I sort of grew up with aspiring producers from our producing program, and directors, like my fellow directing students. like that was a question that I wondered for years, like, is it worth it to just go without a project? So it was great to
Yeah.
hear you say that.
I think that it really is at Sundance. I also go to South by, but generally I'm a mentor there. I'm honored to take part in their mentorship program. So at least that's like a reason to be there. So that's another one I like to go to with or without a film, and same with Cannes. As one that I've now entered into the rotation that I like to go to with or without a film, because in the international side of things, it's really unbeatable. And then there's Berlin, which like it snowballs, like
Right.
it keeps going. But so the more I've been in this industry, the more that people ask me to do things like be on the jury, or do the mentorship thing, or take part in an industry forum. And so often I'll have good excuses to go to these festivals, but I love doing it either way because it's just such a fun place to. I really credit almost all of the relationships that I have in the film industry, either directly or often indirectly, to people that I met at a film festival. So yeah, it's really just important.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you so much. And yeah, let's take a break. We will come back we will come back very soon, everyone. Let me pause this. How do I pause recording? Gee, I've never used there we go. Welcome back. We are with the great producer, Valerie Steinberg. And since we touch on the sort of the beginning, how you came to be a successful producer from, sort of like the genesis, the coming of age story. And so this is for aspiring producers out there who wants to be able to produce feature films and short films like you did. What's the 3 things you would recommend everyone to do right away to push forward their career?
3 things that an aspiring producer should
Yes.
do to push
Yeah,
forward their career.
a student, like a film school student producer. Yeah.
I would say read the trades. Deadline, Hollywood Reporter, Variety, IndieWire, Filmmaker Magazine is great. I think getting familiar with the news that is also kind of a beating heart of this industry is important, because that's where you learn about all kinds of things. You learn about actors that are rising. You learn about companies that are getting deals. You understand what it means for a company to have a deal, and at the corporate level, what's happening with the changes in the industry. So yeah, I think that that's always a great thing to do. IMDb Pro aggregates the news really well. So usually if I'm like, I want to read the industry news, I'll just go to IMDb Pro's news page. Maybe I'll call that the second thing. I would say subscribe to IMDb Pro if you haven't, because not only does it have, that was easy segue, right? Because not only does it have, everybody's contact information who's put it up there, it also is a really great tool for any work that you want to do when you're trying to cast a project or think about how to build teams. And yeah, I guess I'll also mention a book that I read really early on, actually even before I went to Sundance. It was one of the things that made me decide to fly to Sundance to get my career in this industry started, which is Christine Vachon's book, Shooting to Kill, which was published, I believe, in the early 90s. So of course there's things about it that are dated and specific to the time of that industry. But I think it was incredibly confidence building for me that there was a carvable path as an independent producer. And I think that, as Christine has said, the industry is cyclical. So things that were relevant then might be in disguise, but still relevant now. And so, yeah, that's also a recommendation I would make.
Awesome. Thank you so much. These are something everyone can definitely do right away. So I think they're super useful. So thank you for that. And let's do 3 things for the directors or for the filmmakers. Like, what are the 3 things they can do if they want to, say, make a successful short film, or approach a producer like you in order to make a project, something like that?
Yeah, well, those are 2 different questions, but I'll come
Yeah,
with three
sorry. Yeah,
answers
just
that maybe touch on both of those things. No, yeah, all good. I'm just
because
like, this is
because as a director,
yeah.
like it's important to get those shorts in these lead festivals.
Totally. Yeah. Well, the first thing that came to mind when you said advice for directors in general when they're making a short
Right.
is work with an editor, meaning don't be your own editor. I think that a lot of filmmakers, especially people who are still in film school, who have been doing this kind of DIY in high school and have kids, they're like, oh, I make my own films. I edit them, I write them, I direct them, I edit them, I might even act in them. I think that it's always good to collaborate on all of those levels. I would say it's probably also good advice to work with a different writer occasionally, direct someone else's script, or certainly if you are an actor, director, direct things that you're not in. But I think of all the things, the most important piece of advice, because it's the most common thing I see, is work with another editor, because you're always going to benefit from a fresh set of eyes when you're in post. An editor who is not familiar with how challenging it was to get that one shot on that night exterior when it rained and you only had 15 minutes to get it, and it was really expensive because you had to bring in that picture car and all of that stuff, but actually it doesn't work story wise, that editor might go cut it and you'll have to, as I say, kill your darlings. And so that's a really important thing that I would recommend for a director. What else? I'm trying to not repeat myself with other advice that I've given. I would say that, I mean, this is a pretty standard one, but as a short film, really try not to make it more than 15 minutes. People say that all the time, and people love to not heed that advice. People always love to think that they're an exception to that. And of course, you'll see like the Sundance program, I was just looking through it now, it's got shorts that are 17 minutes and 20 minutes, and there's always exceptions. So people go, oh, my short can be 20 minutes because there was one at Sundance that was 20 minutes, but ignore that. Any short film that I've ever made over 20 minutes has had such an uphill battle playing at major festivals. Whereas if it's 10 minutes, I've had 8-minute shorts that have sailed and played everywhere. I've had 12-minute shorts that have done really well. Friday was 16, and that was even almost borderline, but it had amazing premieres and it was, of course, an incredible film. So 16 is like really the top, and that includes credits. Also, this is like part B to that. Don't make your credits any more than 50 seconds, like keep the credits really short because your overall runtime includes the credits. You're sitting there watching a shorts block. Nobody wants to watch. You've watched a whole short, you have 5 more shorts to watch, you have to sit through 2 minutes of credits. It makes no sense. So keep it short. And it's always going to make it better. It's not just practically, because obviously if a programmer has to make a 90-minute shorts block and your movie's long, it's going to take the place of another 2 short movies, right? It's obviously practical on one end, but it's also, it gets better. I've had filmmakers make shorts that were long-ish, and the filmmaker held strong, was like, no, I'm going to keep this at my like 16 and a half minutes or whatever. And we submitted to a few places, it didn't get in. And then the director goes, okay, let me get back into it and cut it open, which is also never great because it costs more money to like redo the sound design and everything. But then like make a shorter version of it. Not only does it have a slightly better, chance at festivals at that point, but also it's better. For a long time, it's probably worth mentioning that I haven't always been able to, fully work in this industry to survive. Like I've always had to have, for the first maybe like 5 to 8 years, even 5 to 7 years that I was doing this, I had to have a side gig to survive in this industry. And I was fortunate to have one that was very flexible and I could do on my own time. And as I was traveling anywhere around the world, which was editing admissions essays for people applying to college and grad school. Having gone to Yale, I was a good candidate to get this job. And it was one I got shortly after graduating. Even before I moved back to New York from Europe, I was working in this job. And so the point is that don't be ashamed if you need to have a side job before your career is really going, because it took me a long time. But the point I was making in context here is that I think writing is very analogous to editing film, in that shorter is often better, because when you're applying for college and grad school and you have to send in admissions essays and short answer statements and everything within 250 words or 2,500 characters or very specific word counts, I've become very skilled at like shaving. Like if someone sends me a 750 word thing that has to be 500 words, I can very adeptly like turn it into 500 words, which is, by the way, also a really good producer skill, because you apply to a lot of grants and labs and things to do that. So that's been really helpful. But anyway, it always makes it better. I mean, of course, there's like a limit to that. If you have to make something 250 words that was originally 1,000, you're probably going to take out some good stuff. But normally shorter does make it better. And I really try to drive that home for my filmmakers when we're working on shorts, especially at the script stage, because that's where it's not going to cost you anything to reduce later, it's going to be a waste of something or others, if only time. So yeah, keep it under 15, ideally under 12 I would say is a really nice number to aim for. And yeah, I think another good tip if you're thinking about short filmmaking is a lot of people make shorts as proofs of concept for features, right? And that can happen in a variety of ways. That can happen when people already have a feature script and then they reverse engineer it and they make a short because they can't afford to make the feature yet and they want a proof of concept to show to people to get the feature made. And then sometimes it's the reverse where they've just made this short because they're, they thought they've written the script for this short and then they later realize that they could also make a feature and they've written the feature script before or after making the short, right? This of course can happen in all ways. But I would say I know people who have done that and it takes a really long time to make a short and then a feature. And if you're telling the exact same story, like the short and the feature are really the same character going through the same journey, you're probably yourself as the filmmaker going to get tired of that story. And to the point where you're making the feature, which is like the be all end all goal at this point, is you don't want to be like over it. You don't want to be like, I can't wait to tell the next story. And many people do have to put that feature script in the drawer and write another feature script just for their own sake and or because they really feel like they've hit a wall with getting that film made. So I still think it's a really good tool to use a short to make a feature, but I would recommend coming at it from a different angle. I think actually, again, Laura Moss's Friday is a really good example. So Laura has a film that they're still trying to get made, which will hopefully be the next or one of their next films, not Birth Rebirth, which has come out, but there's this other script that I won't mention because it's probably proprietary information, but that Laura had been working on for before we even made Friday while they were still at NYU Grad Film, and wrote the script for Friday because they realized, both Laura and the co-writer Brendan realized that this is a story that Friday, also set in the 80s, dealing with the backdrop of something that is like evoking the tone and the backdrop. Basically, they wanted people to watch Friday and go, okay, those filmmakers could make that feature. There's so many other examples. Like if you think about Jim Cummings' Thunder Road, a great success story of a short film that won Sundance and a feature film that won South by. I don't think Jim had written the feature when he made the short, but that's an interesting case study about like what can a short to feature be. And so Thunder Road, the first scene of the feature is the short. So that's like you take a short and then you keep going, right? Or like Trey Edward Schultz's Krisha is like another really interesting counterexample to a short to feature adaptation where similarly Trey had the short, but I don't forget if it won, but did well at South by, and then a feature, I think 2 years later that did well at South by as well. And that was a story of a family at Thanksgiving and going haywire, right? So that was like all in one night of Thanksgiving. And the short was, from the beginning of the evening to the end of the evening. And the feature was from the beginning of the evening to the end of the evening. So it's taking the same story and expanding it. So there's lots of creative ways to think about it. But what I don't think that, but I think that that's actually the riskier one if you're going into it without like momentum where you're going to get the feature finance right off the bat. Like I would say instead of telling the same story or even a scene from the feature, whether it's the beginning or the middle, like it's probably better to say, how do I tell a story that has the same genre, the same tone? Because you also don't want to say, I made a horror comedy, but I'm trying to make a small coming of age drama feature. And then people go, wow, I want to see a horror comedy. That's why I loved your short. And they're like, well, here's a small coming of age drama feature, right? So keep it the same genre generally if you have a feature as your goal, right? Keep it in the same tone. Keep it maybe in the same time period if it's period. Keep it in the same world. It doesn't have to have the same age protagonist. It doesn't have to have the same thing happen to the character. But I would say keep yourself interested in your story, and that can come, in many different forms.
Absolutely. Yeah, like I can resonate with so much of what you just said, not just as a filmmaker, because like I made some of the mistakes that you mentioned myself, but also like on the programming side, we see these mistakes over and over again and every year. So yeah, like that was so, what you said was, I just resonate with this so much. And we'll take another break and we'll be back very soon. Hey, we are back with the wonderful Valerie Steinberg. Valerie, let's talk about some of the very successful shorts you made, just since we just talk about, the sort of the suggestions you can give to short filmmakers. Let's talk about Hair Wolf, which is available on YouTube right now. So everyone, if you want to take a look, please go. And not now, please go check it out after the show. So why don't you? I find kind of like a lot of the shorts, including Hair Wolf, Freeze, and the Breakthrough. They all have this kind of campy, fantastical element. I don't know if that's something that you are naturally gravitated towards, or is it just a happy accident that they have these qualities?
Yeah, there are definitely synergies in the filmography and specifically in the short films that I've made. I wouldn't say campiness itself is the quality that I look for, but yeah,
I
there's
say
certainly
it
some that
in
fall
the
more
good,
into that
like campy in the
category.
good way.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, I no. There's certainly some
Yeah,
that I've worked on that are very
yeah.
much campy, but no, I would say the through line is more female-driven stories, diversity-driven stories, for sure. And then besides that, yes, I do love when there's a fantastical element. And so, yes, Hairwolf is a horror comedy that certainly gets into the supernatural in its own way. Freeze is very much in that space with regards to the imagination sequences that become very surreal and dreamlike. And the Breakthrough has one very specific um, genre element that, but is otherwise, and including that, is arguably very grounded in reality. But does have that kind of twist that I will not spoil because it's worth watching.
Yes.
By the way, The Breakthrough, we are going to be releasing publicly online next month.
Awesome.
And just a quick shout out because yeah, The Breakthrough is a short film that premiered at South by last year, 2023, and stars Greta Lee and Ben Sinclair. It's directed by Daniel Sinclair, and I produced it along with Kate Shimuris. But yeah, so Greta Lee is, of course, getting a lot of attention right now for her incredible performance in Past Lives.
Yes.
So we are releasing The Breakthrough online next month to coincide with this awards season. So you should be able to see it, and therefore I won't give away the spoiler yet. So yes, anyway, all of these 3 short films and many of my other ones have a genre element or genre elements. And that is something that I look for. I think that genre is an incredible lens through which to tell stories about our reality, about our society, about things that are otherwise kind of hard to talk about or that could otherwise be quite heavy to talk about in a way that can be inviting and entertaining and allow people to open their mind to new ideas. I also find that the marketplace is very receptive to genre now more than ever and more than anything
Absolutely.
else, especially in the US. I mean, even when you see things like, or talking about globally, when you see things like Titan winning the Palme d'Or or Anatomy of the Fall winning the Palme d'Or, right? Like that was never the case in previous eras that a genre or genre-oriented movie would win the Palme d'Or. And then, of course, domestically, you're seeing it as well.
Yeah, everywhere, all at once. Everything, everywhere, all at
Yes,
once.
exactly. Winning the Oscar. I mean, like
Yeah.
that's just incredible. That's one of my favorite movies for sure of all time, probably. But yeah, in terms of I mean, and so as a producer, where my job is many things, but I can't do almost any of the other things until I do the first part of the job, which is getting the movie financed. And in order to find the financing for the movie, you have to play ball within a lot of different parameters, especially in the US. It's very cast dependent, and it's also very genre dependent. And if you're trying to make a drama, that's like a bad word in Hollywood, drama, which is ridiculous because when you look at the Oscars, there's always dramas. And so again, people might earlier in their career in this industry might look at the, very publicly lauded films and go, oh, dramas. That's what people want. But it's only at the highest level when they have the highest level of financial backing and when they already have probably very well-known cast and director, and often when they're based off of true stories or IP that's very valuable, that they can kind of get to that place. And so there's always exceptions, and I always look for things that surprise me. So that might be completely breaking my own rules. But yes, I'm very much open to genre. My slate is very genre leaning. And by my slate, I mean the movies that I'm trying to get made right now. I probably only 1 or 2 that aren't really in the genre space at all. So yeah, I'm looking for things that, like buzzwords that people probably overuse, but certainly fall into what I'm often drawn to, are like high concept films, stylish genre, elevated horror, things that can take, you know, a new angle on a genre, and specifically that angle is often representation.
Awesome. Yeah. Because you touch on the financing side of the producing. So in the short film making world, how's that like? I'm genuinely curious because I've done short films, but as a student, so you have the backing, you know, of the school, especially at UCLA. They have like some funding for it. But like if an independent like professional filmmaker say, hey, I want to make a short film, what's the best way other than online, you know, like the online crowdfunding, what's the best way to approach that?
Yeah, so that's a question I get a lot. People approach me all the time with short film scripts, and I very rarely produce shorts anymore. So I'm often having to kind of like give people the hard truth of the matter. But the hard truth of the matter is the vast majority of short films are self-funded.
Yeah.
People putting their own money into it, whether they come from wealth or whether they save up for years to be able to do that, whether they co-fund it with a family member, with a friend who's getting an EP credit or a producer credit. A lot of it is self-funded, and that falls into the world of crowdfunding as well. That's really doing a lot of legwork in order to raise the money from your friends. That's not a great piece of advice for anyone that doesn't happen to have a large amount of money available for their own short film. So failing that, there's always various opportunities. I can shout out some really cool short film programs that exist. There's the Rising Voices program, that is a diversity focused short film program run by Lena Waithe and Rishi Rajani's company Hillman Grad, along with Ventureland and LinkedIn, I think, are their sponsors. And they have a partnership with Tribeca as well. Yeah, so there's always some really good ones that come out of that. They are funded, I think, somewhat generously. There's the Disney Launchpad program, which is pretty selective, only takes a few, but is also very well funded. There's they just announced a new one called Proof of Concept, where Dirty Films, which is Kate Blanchett and Coco Francini's company, has partnered with Netflix and I believe also a brand to choose some short filmmakers that are looking to make a proof of concept for a feature. So that's something that I believe is open right now. I don't know when this is airing, but you can check that out. So there's always programs. And I think that the more that studio streamer type companies that invest in this do it, the better. I was very fortunate in 2022 to work very closely with a company called 20th Digital Studio that at the time was part of Disney. And I worked on a series called Bite Size Halloween, whereby I executive produced, along with 20th Digital Studio, 21 short films that were all entirely funded by Disney and all premiered on Hulu. So you can still watch those on Hulu. It's called Bite Size Halloween. Season 3, the latest season, is the one that I worked on. And I worked with that company on various programs as well, including their Bite Size Holiday, which was more like Christmas, etc., focused short films. But the Halloween ones are on Hulu. And those are genre shorts as well, and also very diversity focused and really well selected and curated and executed. And I'm very proud of all the shorts that came out of that. So that was also, again, an instance where a studio had a division that focused on making short films for the purpose of IP generating, that, you know, they can then develop them into features and perhaps series one day, etc. And in this case, it was diversity focused by the by, but some of them are explicitly diversity focused, like Rising Voices, etc. And often that comes from like the DEI departments of studios. And unfortunately, we've seen in the recent year a lot of constricting in studios, both in terms of letting go DEI departments, as well as letting mass layoffs in general across the studios and streamers. So it's not necessarily a great time to expect an upsurge in that. But if anyone is listening who has any role at a studio or streamer, it is a very good business plan, I think, from their perspective, to invest in short films, because they're giving opportunities to filmmakers who get these shorts that are a calling card for them, can play festivals, can be viewed on platforms like Hulu, but also if the studio keeps the IP, they can develop them into features. It's a win-win, honestly. Yeah. So when those programs exist, like, definitely worth submitting. Other than that, you know, other countries have this a lot easier. You know, people that come from Sweden or Canada, like there's like a lot more government funding for movies. We don't, for short films especially, we don't have that here. So yeah, if there's grants available, you know, there's a lot of institutions that also have really lovely finishing grants, maybe more often than than grants when you haven't made the short yet. And I can shout out Future of Film is Female, a really great New York-based organization that's for female and non-binary filmmakers. There's Rooftop Films, also New York-based, that does an amazing summer-long festival with outdoor screenings all over New York. That also has a really great grant program. No film school aggregates these grants usually into quarterly grant lists.
Yes.
So there's, there are grants out there. The problem is a lot of those grants take a really long time. So if you're like, I have a short that I want to shoot in 6 weeks or 2 months or even in 3 months, and I have like cast and DP and people lined up, and I know exactly when I want to shoot it, and then I can apply for this grant, but the grant isn't deadline until 2 months from now, and I won't hear back until 5 months from now, and then I won't get the money till 7 months from now. Sometimes these grants are unfortunately really spread out. But yeah. And then there's always the strategy of trying to find an investor, an angel investor type, and to pitch them on investing in your short as a development expense towards a future feature, which is a whole other topic of conversation.
Right.
But there is a way to approach that. But it's important that any investor be informed that it's very unlikely that the short film itself will make any money. But if it's treated as a development expense towards a feature film budget, which again is usually probably most effective if there's already a feature film script, then it could be like, look, if you give me 50K for this short, I'll give you 60K back when we make the feature, if and when the feature is financed. But again, only if. It might not happen. You have to be agreeing that. But then you'll make a 10%, a 20% profit on this, whatever it is. And I will just put that in my feature budget, and I've made a short, like there's strategies there, but of course then you have to know that person to whom 50K is nothing. But yeah.
Yeah, no, that's super helpful to know. And also, just since we talk about film grants, I want to give a shout out to our Santa Fe Film Institute, which provides multiple grants for different level of filmmakers, in-state and regional ones in adjacent states. So you listener out there, if you happen to be eligible, please apply for it. And do you want to, because you touch on Karmalink a little bit earlier, do you want to talk about a little bit more details about how that came together and how it was able to premiere at Venice Film Festival, which is everyone's dream?
Yeah, I mean, it's not a particularly long story. The movie was fully independently financed, and it came together, bit by bit, but we were able to go into production with enough to know that we could get through production, and then had to raise more in post. And in terms of getting into Venice, we were very, very lucky. And we made the best film we could. I think also the development labs that we did really helped. I quickly shouted them out earlier, but these are both specific for Asian films. And they can be Asian American films. They can be films that are made in Asia by Asians, by non-Asians, but generally they're for films made in Asia by Asians. And the Hong Kong Asia Film Financing Forum, which is coming up in March, that takes place during Film Art, which is the big market in Hong Kong. And then this project market called the Focus Asia Project Market was especially great for us because it's in northern Italy, less than an hour outside Venice. And so there was a lot of overlap, people that were involved with the Focus Asia Project Market and people that were in the orbit of Venice. And so in particular, the person that runs that market ended up being a delegate on the programming team of the Venice Critics Week in the year that we were applying, Alessandro Groplero. He's amazing. So yeah, it was a really fortuitous synchronicity there. And then, once we premiered at Venice, we were fortunate to get the attention of festivals like Santa Fe and many others that gave us a great year of festivals.
Yes, awesome. Thank you for giving us all these information. I think a lot of our listeners are going to find them very useful. We're going to take another break, and we'll be back very soon. Welcome back, and so let's talk about, let's have a fun segment. Let's talk about just the movies of 2023 and the war season in general. What's your top 3, your personal favorite films of 2023?
That I can immediately answer because I have very much been following award season and seeing everything. My top 3 are American Fiction, Past Lives, and Poor Things. All very different, incredibly different genres, incredibly different demographics, but 3 fantastic films that are really extraordinary, and I hope reap it up and win all the awards.
So let's talk a little bit about the details of the reason why you love them. So Past Life, which was also one of my favorite of 2023, extremely touching. And you mentioned that you came from kind of a theater producing world, and I know the writer director, she was a playwright, right? If I remember correctly.
Yeah, Celine Song, she was
Yeah.
a playwright, a very acclaimed playwright,
Yes.
and this is her debut feature and her debut directing foray, as far as I understand. And yeah, it's extraordinary. But it's very clear that her theater background really informs her approach. I think it's clear in the watching of the film. I've also had the privilege of attending a couple Q&As with the screenings of the film, and I've heard the actors, both Greta and Teo, talk about how Celine is like the most incredible director, in that they just fully trusted her. And even when she might have them do some odd things in their process, they were just like, no questions, like fully trusting her. And I think that some of that really comes from her really strong theater background. I think that, when you do theater, you do a ton of rehearsal. And even as the playwright, you're in those rehearsals. In fact, the character that Greta Lee plays in Past Lives, like as a writer, sits in on rehearsals. Like it's very autobiographical, I think, for Celine in that way. But yeah, I think that just like the rigor that theater entails of seeing rehearsal after rehearsal, of working for weeks and weeks with actors before you're even performing, it's very different from film, but I think it really informs a directorial approach.
Yeah, having lived in New York myself, I'm a huge fan of the theater, and her background was very obvious. I was like, yes, like this is from a theater person, and I love the dialogue. I love the nuances of all the emotion, and as a someone who's from outside of the country myself, I just it just so many things in the movie just resonate with me. About So let's all talk about Poor Things. It was on my personal top 10 list, but I'm still like trying to figure out what it's kind of exactly about. I get a little bit of a message, but it's hard to kind of put them together in a cohesive sentence. Like, what's your like short takeaway of Poor Things?
I just loved how inventive it was. And I know it's based off of a book where a lot of the storytelling came directly from the page there. But then, of course, Yorgos took it to an incredible height of design and of performance and of inventiveness. I think, of course, the production design and the costume design is extraordinary, and I hope it gets recognition for that. And of course, Emma Stone's performance amongst the other performances, also amazing. Willem Dafoe, Mark Ruffalo, etc. Really just mind-blowing. I mean, it's really hard to imagine pulling that off. If you're an actor and you're like, you need to play a grown woman with a baby's brain implanted in your head without being offensive to every single person who watches it. Like, how to pull that off is truly remarkable. And yeah, I just think it's a really amusing comedy, hilarious story that has a lot of really deep insights about the human condition and how we get along in this world, and what it means to be constrained by others, what it means to find liberty in yourself. And yeah, I just love the ride of it.
Awesome. American fiction. The writer director is from television background, sort of. I believe he wrote for Succession, which I also love. Have you ever considered sort of like venturing into the television world? Just since we are.
Yeah, that's a segue, I guess. We'll get back to Cord and American fiction, but
of
course, yeah. I think the film and TV industries are very overlapping, but also TV, from my understanding, is incredibly hierarchical, and there's a process, and people ascend in it through a very specific way, and it's not as easy as film, which is also, of course, challenging. But film has an independent film side; it always has, and it's very conducive to that. And the sort of Wild West, by my own bootstraps, I'm just going to make a movie with some money I found and like might premiere it at Sundance, it might get picked up by a major distributor and released. There's a history of that, and there's, you know, an acceptance of that to some level in the highest levels of the industry, even like, you know, Everything Everywhere All at Once, where I guess that was originally made by A24, but like Moonlight, you know, like there are examples of
Right.
movies that go all the way, that weren't even financed by studios, or even if they are, then they're the follow-up feature to one of a filmmaker who broke through with an independently financed movie. And so in television, there are independent television makers. There's Series Fest, which is an amazing place. I had the opportunity to be on the jury last year in Denver that works to truly highlight episodic storytellers who are working independently. But it's really challenging. And then, of course, festivals have increasingly embraced that as well, with the episodic sections at major film festivals, pilot competitions, digital series, all of that. But there's just much less of an embracing of that, I think, in the actual Hollywood side of things in terms of the television industry. It's rare that somebody is going to be like, look, I self-financed or raised the money on my own, a full 8-episode, 30-minute series. Will you acquire it and put it on HBO? Like that almost never happens. And in terms of even like doing part of that, it rarely happens. It's usually like very internal development. So for me as an independent producer, it has not seemed like the easiest path to walk. That being said, just on that side of things, I know so many creators and writers and filmmakers who might have written a pilot in addition to their feature work that they send me. And so on occasion, I do take those on. I'm working on a limited series right now. That's an adaptation of a novel with a great friend of mine who's writing and directing the whole season. When a limited series is interesting, it's kind of halfway between a feature and a series. But it's a new area for me. So yes, I'd love to do it if they'll have me. Yeah, it seems a little bit of a tough barrier to entry there, but would love to make it work. Back to American fiction. So my understanding is Cord Jefferson, the director there, directed many seasons and episodes of television, and this is his first feature as writer director. But certainly he's no beginner with the craft of directing. But yeah, again, based off of a novel, and again, I had the opportunity to attend a Q&A with Cord where I heard him speak about this. And, you know, he basically said, like, when he read this novel, he was like, I could have written this myself. Like, it was so resonant for him based on even like certain autobiographical details about his own family and his own life. And what I love about American fiction is it's actually like ultimately a really heartfelt family drama about a mother and her children and the sibling dynamics. But it's couched in this social satire, which of course, you know, I wouldn't love the movie anywhere near as much if I didn't love the social satire element, because that was done magnificently. But where it really wins you over is a combination of that and the fact that you can be like understanding what it's like to watch your mother grow old, and what it's like to have the loss of a sibling, and what it's like to be a struggling writer who's not understood in their field. And so like all of that is there. But then it puts it in this just hilarious context of what if a Black writer decided to use a pseudonym and write a satirically, quote unquote, Black style to appeal to white people and succeeded. And it's just so pitch perfect. And I really think that it's going to get a lot of recognition. I can't wait for more and more people to see it.
Yeah, like as you know, as a minority filmmaker myself, I can totally understand the sort of like what you are expected to make versus what you really want to make. And that's what I articulated, that kind of sometimes frustration so well, that I so appreciate. And since you said you were going to Sundance, are there some titles that you are really looking forward to see?
I got to shout out my friend Kobe Libby, who I went to college with, and is premiering his debut feature, The American Society of Magical Negroes. Actually, both Kobe and Cord were both featured this past month, I think, in Variety's 10 Directors to Watch. So Kobe's very much on the rise. His movie is already going to be released by Focus Features. He did the Sundance Writing and Directing Labs. He's had a successful acting career. So this is just like the next major milestone for him. And I cannot wait to see that film. It probably has a lot of resonance with American fiction. From what I understand, the story is about a young Black man and a society where Black people are there to please white people. So there's some interesting synergies there for sure. So I can't wait to see that one. I'll just shout out that one because I haven't seen anything yet, but we'll be there this weekend.
Awesome. Yeah, no, I've never been to Sundance. I always wonder what it's like. So yeah, I'm sure you're gonna have a lot of fun over there. And any last thoughts, just in general, kind of want to tell our tell our audience just about anything?
No, yeah, I think we've covered so much. Thank you so much for having me and this show. And for anyone listening, just stick with it, because there's so many ways to make strides in this industry. And yeah, just finding your people and working together and being collaborative and being grateful for each other. And that's all we can ask.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Valerie. And that wraps it up, our episode. And we hope to have you back someday, maybe talk about your experience on Sundance and your upcoming projects. Thank you so much. And yeah, have a great rest of the day and the week.
Thanks so much, Nate.
Yeah, I'm gonna stop recording.